Hello, North Carolina, and thank you again for joining us on Liberty Inc., our second to last episode of this season. I hope you all have enjoyed it. We have another good one today. We have JJ Campbell and Andrew Kinzie for our second part of candidating, as I sit down and have a conversation with them about what made them a Libertarian and why they're running. And then Travis is almost better, but not quite up for it. He promises he will be back for the last one. So we had Dub and Share Talk Sports. As always, communications@lpnc.org. If you have anything you want to discuss, comments, feedback, guests, hate, relationship problems, I do charge for that. This is Rob Yates, your friendly neighborhood communications director, saying it has been a wonderful season thus far. One episode to go. Thank you very much and enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the penultimate episode of Season 3 of Liberty Inc. We are thrilled today to have two more candidates, Candidate Forum 2. We have Andrew Kinzie. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. And you are running as a Libertarian. You want to tell everyone? I always go through this. I start to say what you're running for, and I'm like, you know what? Why don't you tell everyone what you're running for?
Yep. So I'm running for town council, small town, Jamestown, North Carolina, just outside of Greensboro, basically wedged between Greensboro and High Point. There's
Awesome.
two positions, and I believe there's 5 candidates currently in the process for that.
Okay. All right. And then we also have with us JJ Campbell. JJ, you want to tell everyone what you're running for?
Yeah, I'm running for Durham City Council at large.
Okay. So running as a Libertarian, not for the faint of heart, for sure. I'm also doing it. I'm running for mayor of Charlotte, which has been kind of a fun and interesting experience. And I want to sort of get into the campaigns, what your goals are, but let's stick with you, JJ. Just tell everyone about yourself. Like, when did you realize you were a Libertarian? Why are you running as a Libertarian?
Oh boy, how long do we have? So one of the stories that I kind of want to share with this is I had a chance to go to Ghana as the technical director for something called Empower Playgrounds. We were building playgrounds that generate electricity. And I was talking with the guy who started it, who's a retired ExxonMobil VP. And I was like, hey, I'd like to do this full time. Would you mind hiring me on to do this full time? And he's like, I will do that if you really want, but you're going to be far more effective if you go out and get a regular job first, earn some money, and come back so that you can do more good. And that kind of started me along a more corporate path for a little while. And when I was a corporate scientist for Fortune 500, I started to get more involved with politics because I saw that our politicians were not representing us very well. And there's a group called Represent Us. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. Represent.us is their website, and they've got all sorts of data about how our government does not function very well in terms of representing the people anymore. I can give you some statistics if you're interested, or you guys could just go look them up. But so I started looking around for what I could do and how I could run. I brand myself as a bad libertarian. I have a lot of progressive ideas, but a lot of those are because they would actually be cheaper if we implemented than what we're doing right now, and cheaper on the taxpayers. Not just cheaper per person, but cheaper on our tax budget. And so anyway, that's why I brand myself as a bad libertarian. But that the libertarians are the most established of the third parties, and so that was what kind of drew me to them and got me started with them. And I started working towards getting into office to see if I can start changing stuff.
It's interesting you mentioned Represent Us and how politicians don't. There's a video that was going around and it's Jennifer Lawrence of all people introducing it, but it turns out that it doesn't matter what major party, which side of the uniparty, as I say, but they sort of do about 30% of what their constituents want, and that's the 30% that overlaps with what their big donors want.
Those are the statistics I was going to tell you about. Jennifer Lawrence is actually on the board of directors for Represent Us.
Oh, okay,
So
awesome.
It's one of their videos.
Got it. So here's your first line. What I want you to do is take any issue you really care about and picture it on this line. This line comes from a Princeton University study that shows how public opinion influences the laws that Congress does or doesn't pass. They looked at 1,800 public opinion polls over a 20-year period, and we took their data and plotted it in this chart. See this horizontal line? That shows public support for a law amongst average Americans. This vertical line? That shows the likelihood of the public support leading to the passage of a law. When you plot it for the average American, you get a line that looks like this. There's your issue sitting on that line. If there is zero support for a law, there's about a 30% chance that Congress is going to pass it. And if there is 100% support for something, the most popular thing ever, there's still a 30% chance that Congress is going to pass it. So the line.
And then Andrew, tell me about your journey. You were saying something interesting beforehand, and I stopped because I want you to keep going with that on the podcast. How'd you become Libertarian? Why are you running as a Libertarian?
So I'm brand new to the Libertarian Party. I literally joined about 3 months ago after doing a bunch of research. I was started out my political beliefs as a liberal, sort of transitioned to the conservative side fairly heavily as I got older, than constitutionalist. And the more I've learned through education and everything else, the more I've aligned my views with the Libertarian Party. I'm for free market, civil liberties, limited government as well. And I have a belief in individual freedom. And I feel as far as our town government, they have failed the citizens within our community. They don't give our citizens a voice. Anytime citizens have, or any council meetings, when they open the floor for public comment, they don't really go into answering any of those questions that are raised during those sessions. And I feel like that's a disservice for our citizens as a whole. They're not getting a clear picture or full answers to some of the issues I am seeing in our town.
You know, I've gone and spoken at a fairly decent amount of city and town council meetings now. And one of the things that drives me crazy is, like, one, you get like 2 to 5 minutes, because, like, I guess freedom of speech has a time limit. And then two, they're sitting there, they're playing on their phones, they're doodling, they're looking away, like they don't care what you're saying. The more people they are, the more sort of like batten down the hatches defense position they take. And it's just like, yeah, but
yeah, we have one that is running for re-election. That one of the biggest issues right now facing our town is the water quality. Our town water is contaminated with PFAS, PFOA, and all the other polyfluorochemicals out there. And the town sort of hid it from the citizens for the longest time. If you look back the last 2 years, there's no water quality reports on our town's website. You can find them, but it takes a little bit of digging. And then there's one council member who's running for re-election that he makes it a point, anytime somebody questions the water quality, each council session, he actually has a glass of water that he gets from our tap each session, and makes it a point to be drinking from that glass anytime they're talking, and clanking it on the table in front of him, just to try and be that disruption. And something interesting, NC Newsline actually just released an article last week, basically calling out Jamestown for failure to report, and it actually being documented and proof of documentation for chemicals within our water.
But we need the EPA and the government regulations to make sure we're safe, right? All that does is, you know, you both brought up an interesting point. So Andrew, you're talking about liberal to conservative to Constitution, and JJ, you're talking about being a bit more progressive. I think the thing that appeals to me the most about the Libertarian Party, so as a political instrument as opposed to the philosophy, is that we're not necessarily against any idea, but like put your idea to the test. If it's a better idea, it will survive. What we're against is forcing other people to embrace your idea or morality. And then we're about, decentralization and local government. So like you say, you're a bad libertarian. There's a wide range. I hang out with too many anarchists. They're all crazy. Uh, but in all seriousness, like, we're not against government, we're against the state, and there's a big difference. And it's this top-down mandate. A local government that's doing good things for its citizens, like freedom of association, freedom of disassociation, feel free to leave if you don't like it. But when the government is making promises about safety and what you're getting is water that's giving people cancer, that's a big problem. You mentioned the guy drinking the water at the thing. Have you seen the video with the comedian who's talking about, I got 3 vaccines, flu shot, shingles shot, and then she passes out on the stage and hits her head?
I don't mean to brag, I don't care, but I want you to know, double vaxxed, booster, flu shot, and I'm gonna be honest, I have the shingle shot too. And I still get my period. What? Yes! Traveled, went to Mexico twice, did shows, meet and greets, never got COVID. Clearly, Jesus loves me the most. Seriously. So nice, so nice.
It's pretty bad. Like they thought she was making a point, like, oh, she flipped out, and it's like, nope, she's really had something. But like if the guy's drinking the water and all of a sudden he just started throwing up, a worm emerged from his head or something.
It was kind of comical. This guy that drinks the water, we had a candidate forum on Tuesday. Things got a little bit heated in the end with the water quality between he and I, but throughout the entire questioning and that forum, he was making comments and joking about his poor health and everything else. But then he's drinking from the water the entire time. One of the citizens actually called him out on it on social media, like, you're denying the PFAS and all these chemicals, but yet you're over there complaining about your health constantly.
Go figure. Well, let me stick with you, Andrew. So obviously water quality is an issue. What other issues are pressing for you? What's your platform?
Basically providing a voice for the people. If they don't have the answer or I don't have the answer, researching that to try and figure out a solution for them and trying to create common ground to bridge that gap between current council members and the discontent with a few of the citizens there. Small businesses have also sort of been left behind. Well, restaurants struggle, or restaurants are succeeding very well in our town, but there's a lot of boutiques that have struggled. One, in fact, has been denied signage because they don't own the corner lot to that main thoroughfare, but they have an agreement with that owner that they can use that lot for signage and a parking lot. But our town ordinance, if you get denied for signage, you have to wait a year before you can reapply.
I'm going to withhold comment on that one.
It's like, how are you're restricting our small businesses from being able to succeed. And the reason they're successful is they host 3 small fairs throughout the year, not with support from the town, but on their own accord. And that's where they make the majority of their money, are those 3 festivals.
Okay. So it sounds like like the political class actually being representative of the people is a theme here. JJ, you said that's what you started with, but what other issues? What are your driving platform top 3?
Well, it's the same thing still. So like my big one is ranked choice voting, and then kind of along with that is the political responsibility to the people. And I want to use technology to allow individual citizens to cast a vote on everything that crosses my desk. So instead of me having to be responsible to the people once every 4 years, they can, if they want the development, instead of having to come to the meeting and spend their 2 to 5 minutes, and just the people who are living in that neighborhood coming to the meeting, the city gets to weigh in. And kind of like Reddit, just a thumbs up, thumbs down, something simple. But
Nice.
yeah, I think that would be really good. Now it's going to take a lot of work to put in, and it's a good thing that I have some background in startup and techs, so that I think I could actually implement that. But that's really my main issue. The other ones, it's things like affordability, affordable living. And there's a lot of ways that we can go about that from a libertarian perspective, that don't require a lot of top-down stuff. And then connecting our bikes and our roads and all of that, the infrastructure, that's one of the things that I think the government has a mandate for. I know not all the libertarians will agree with me on that, but when it comes to infrastructure, I think that's really where the government should be focused.
To be fair, regardless of who agrees with you, if that's all the government was doing, a lot of people would be pretty content with that.
Fair enough.
I feel our state government's failing miserably for Durham and Wake County. Looking at the highway expansion along I-40, they've complained about wanting to implement light rail or a metro type system. That center lane, that would have been perfect, and it would have lowered the cost of construction tremendously compared to actually having to build something from scratch.
Well, and that is a good point that we can talk about for a couple minutes. Here in Durham, what they told us is that the rail was killed by one letter from one organization. I will let you guess who that organization was. But the fact that there's one elephant in the room that has enough weight that they can completely kill years of planning, and I don't know how many thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars went into that, killed by one person or one group, that is not political representation.
If I remember correctly, I think it was actually close to 65 million that went into it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
65 million of our dollars, and then they're jacking up my property taxes.
Yeah. So
I'm not surprised about the one group. I mean, you look at, so we got a permitless pistol purchase, and then they were going to go to constitutional carry, and believe it or not, the NRA stopped that. And the public story is that, I forget how they were worried about not getting, or like the politics of going too far with things, but the suspicion is that they were making a lot of money off some of the concealed carry classes, and if you went constitutional carry, then people in North Carolina you'd still need a permit to carry in other states with your North Carolina permit, but not here. But it's these little things. The whole casino deal, the podcast from last week with Andy Stevens, and we're talking about just the craziness of it, and then there's like this pettiness at the state level. So like Tom Moore, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the whole story, but he like banished one of the Democrats to the basement because that guy had called him out for having an affair with someone. I don't even know. It belongs in a soap opera, but that's our state government. But these are the things that make news, and then it's like, hey, 65 million on planning a light rail. Oh, whoops. Like, where'd that go? But God forbid we ask Duke to clean up a coal ash spill, right? Well, so I'll chill, because once I start complaining about specific government things, I'm like a fiend, like the crack right in front of me. But so JJ, you're talking about how they don't represent us. You're pointing some things out. What are the specific issues you see with your current town council, the way it's structured, the way it's run, the people on it? And what are the things you like? So point this out to the voters. You got an audience here, but then what would you change, and how would you change it?
So there's a lot of infighting that's been going on, and there's been a lot of allegations of corruption. I don't know how true any of them are. I'm relatively new to Durham, so I'm unfortunately having to pick up a lot from the rumor mill and from what my neighbors are telling me. However, I see a town council or a city council as a team, and it's got to work as a team, and you got to get your ducks in order so that you can work together. Another part of my history, I was an instructor on the third oldest ship in the world that still sails. It's the tall ship Alyssa. And one of the things that you have to do when you're sailing with a crew that large of volunteers is you have to lead in your group, and you have to move things together as a group. And now you still have, the captain. And one of the cool things that we had was you can question any order. You can ask them all the questions you want, but you have to wait until the maneuver's done. Because if you don't, someone could die.
Okay.
And so, you've got to work together as a team. And so I want to bring more of that to bear. And I think that things like ranked choice voting and using the technology to let the citizenry vote on every issue crossing our desks would really help us to follow the captain, being the people of Durham, and get our stuff together and really work together. And it means that anybody who is caught voting against us or trying to impede the progress, right there, everybody will know. And they won't have to wait 4 years to piece out all the different things that they voted for or against. They will know immediately every single time.
To be fair, if there are people who support that, then they'll know too. I mean, it works both ways. Like, yeah, no, I follow it. We Mike Ross, hashtag Fire the Uniparty, is running for governor, and one of his planks is that any bill that comes across his desk, he will veto immediately unless it is on public display 1 day for every page in the bill.
That would be fun. Yeah, so
but
everybody
people-
actually has time to read
yeah,
the thing.
Exactly. So what about you, Andrew? Where are they messed up the most? What are they doing wrong? What are the problems with the city council?
Honestly, not listening to the people, not providing information. The biggest is transparency and accountability. That's part of the platform I'm running on, is to be completely transparent and be accountable. And that way, providing that information, even going beyond our council or administration within the town, fails to provide the information clearly. The town's website is very hard to navigate. There's not even a search menu on the town to look for old files or anything like that. There's no type of job performance evaluations or criteria to gauge how the employment is and how the employees are functioning, whether the workload is shared among all employees, and whether there's duplication of effort within the various services. They also contract a lot of the services out, even though they have employees for the positions. Like landscaping is one. I understand some of their thought process there. They don't do 10 feet off, but from the right of way for the roads, they actually contract that for safety. But then they contract town hall and the fire station, and then want the park right across the street. And it's like, there's no safety risk there. Why can't our town employees not be taking care of that instead of throwing out another contract? They raised our taxes pretty heavily this past year. My water bill doubled over a month. My
for the record, you're probably cleaning up water for Duke Energy there.
Yeah. Well, not just Duke Energy. A lot of our issue, because Duke Energy was the Dan River, it actually goes around us, so it doesn't affect us.
Fair enough.
But
it affects me.
But we have one worse than Duke Energy. We have a company that went bankrupt in the 90s called Seaboard Chemical.
Okay.
And the funny part about that is that if you do a little bit of research, is part of the reasoning for the Cape Fear River Basin having such high contaminant levels.
Sure. Good figure. And I laugh in spite, not in humor.
It's actually right under just border outside of Jamestown in High Point. But it's right on the leach field is right under Randleman Lake, which is is our main water supply reservoir for Jamestown. We purchase it through Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority. So it's known contamination. They declared bankruptcy. The EPA got involved and tried to force a cleanup, but the corporations
people
that
who run
have
the
any
EPA
type
are
of
paid off.
share
Yeah.
have continued to put it off. They've done surface. Yep, the cost is tremendous,
But
and they've done
doesn't
surface
cost much to essentially
decontamination.
bribe politicians.
But the ground contamination is still there, so it's slowly leaching up through the ground into our lake, and then going downstream from there.
This is something that blows my mind. So you both talk about accountability, transparency, representing the people. This is a common theme we hear for government. And I think part of the reason is that if government was transparent and accountable, you probably wouldn't have so many of the problems that you have. But I think about this. So Andrew, you're a firefighter, right?
Correct.
And JJ, you said you were in the corporate world, so to speak, for a while.
Yeah, I'm a retired geophysicist.
Okay, there you go. So I'm in communications and marketing, but I was at two of the big banks for a while. And I'm thinking about right now, North Carolina, we just bounced back, I guess we should be proud, to 50% of our third graders reading on grade level. So we were at 40% last year. And they were like, oh, it dipped because of COVID. We're back to pre-COVID levels. Like, so we're failing half our students. JJ, you're talking about you have a volunteer organization, but you can't question one thing until after you're done because people die. And Andrew, you're talking about leaching chemicals. We're going to give kids cancer. So this is literally life or death. When I was at Bank of America, there were things where if you didn't have a 90% success rate, your job was at risk. And that was fine. We knew we were getting into, but 90% was the expected success rate. And we have politicians here patting themselves on the back for getting back to 50%. That's not accountability. That's preposterous. But then instead of any sort of accountability, they're just like, no, blame the Democrats. No, blame the Republicans. And if you don't vote for this person, we're going to become a communist fascism, or I don't even know what they're talking about. It's ridiculous. And they fear monger and they spread hate, and they have no interest in actually making things better, because then we wouldn't need them. Sorry, again, I will rant on how much.
And then they talk about trying to be the solution, and instead of providing all these complaints, provide solutions or provide answers to fixing it. But when you provide those steps or provide any type of solution, they immediately shut it down as well. So it's like,
yeah.
There's too much incentive to keep the problems going, because that's how they keep getting elected. That's how they keep getting donations. That's how they keep getting the money.
And every action has consequences, some good, some bad, depending on your perspective, some intended, some unintended. They will never acknowledge the unintended or negative consequences of their actions, but they will gladly point them out when it's the other side. So we can't even have honest conversations. Yeah, I mean, it's the problem of government, and the more donations they're relying on, they try to move up. I've said on this podcast so many times, but when people on the news, so you see one of the debates or something, and it's like, oh, she did a really good job, she's a shrewd politician. And I'm like, what an insulting thing to say. That means you're good at a popularity contest. There's no you don't know economics, you're not good at foreign policy, you've never managed interstate commerce, you're just good at I don't know, insulting the other side. And that's our political class. I'm not a Donald Trump fan, but I give him all the credit in the world for realizing that essentially our politics is the WWE, and he's just going out there doing the stage announcement, I will eat your wife for dinner. What? I guess more people are voting for that. So I think you both have displayed that you clearly understand the problems at your local levels. What makes you right for the role, though? What do you bring that can change it around?
For me, I'm willing to find the solutions and offer solutions. I'm willing to actually do the extra step of talking to the citizens, trying to connect with them and show them that there's actually somebody that cares about their complaints. Even if I can't resolve the complaint, I'm going to try and minimize the effects of whatever policies we do implement on them, like raising taxes. Unfortunately, with inflation, it is inevitable. But if we're going to add employees, I want us to actually do a true cost benefit analysis to ensure that it's actually needed, and we can't just add the workload elsewhere to another employee that isn't pulling their weight.
JJ?
So I would have a bunch of different things to say on this one. So first of all, I would say that I think that the people of America really can solve most of the problems. I think that almost every issue that we are seeing right now in politics is because we aren't listening to the people. Because yes, mobs of people are stupid, right? But when you have the entire population all thinking independently and working together for the same goals, we're going to get most of these problems solved. You want to get the park cleaned up, you can get the park cleaned up. It's not that hard if you get the community working. But if you've got a bunch of politicians who are paid for by and bought and paid for, right? They're not going to get that done very easily. It's going to be pulling teeth, and they're going to have to go through hoop after hoop after hoop because they know that this is something they can keep campaigning on for another decade.
They're
right.
disincentivized to do it. It's not to interrupt, but did you hear about the one, I believe it was in just outside of Seattle, where there was an argument about building a set of stone stairs on this walkway up a hill, and some guy just went and built the stairs. It cost him like $500, and then they spent like $500,000 taking the stairs down because he had not gotten the approval to do it.
Yes, I remember watching that. I saw it through the memes. So anyway, so that's number one, is let the people speak and let the people be involved. Now, as a politician, I would have a bully pulpit. And so I'm hoping that I can convince them to see my way and vote so that I can vote what I want to vote for. But the other part that I have to this is I'm a scientist. We don't have enough scientists in politics. And part of that is that we like to solve problems. We don't want to have the job for 100 years. We want to get in there, figure out how to make the problem go away so that we are no longer needed, and then go to the next one, and then go to the next one. And so I do have a number of ideas. One simple one is for housing. We talk about all these people getting displaced here in Durham. Well, one idea that I have from some of my background, from some of the history that I've been involved with, because I've helped start a couple nonprofits, I've trained dolphins, I've lived on 4 continents, I flew in 0 gravity, right, as part of a research project doing laser particle levitation. I've done a lot of interesting stuff, and that's given me the background and the knowledge base to be able to bring to bear things like what I call a perpetual development fund. Instead of trying to raise enough money to develop the entire neighborhood all at once, or to develop a whole row of houses at once, let's get enough money together to develop one piece of property. And we can put in 3 or 4 townhomes there. And then the person who lives there can take one of those homes. We can sell the other homes, and we at least make the money back. And then that goes to the next property, and the next property, and the next property. Now, yes, there's a lot of logistical hurdles that have to be covered.
Yeah, it's more nuanced than that, but I follow.
But this is a pretty simple solution. And the biggest problem with it is that it's going to cut out a lot of the big developers. It's going to cut out the big money. And so that's not going to be an easy sell. But in terms of the people, this is a no-brainer. Another simple solution, like we're talking about having to raise taxes. Okay, sure. But how are taxes for a city levied? They're levied based on the property values and sales taxes generally. Like those are our 2 big levers. Why did those taxes have to keep going up? As inflation is going up and as our populations grow, those revenues should be going up commensurate with the population. We shouldn't need to keep raising these taxes, but we do. Okay, so what about looking at something like the way that private universities fund themselves? I don't know the specifics about Duke, that's the local one here, but a lot of these private universities have endowments that are large enough that they don't have to charge anything anymore.
Tens of billions of dollars, literally.
Just off of the interest earned every year, they could run their entire operation. Now, best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time is now.
Right now.
Why do we not have city endowments? Why do we not have state endowments? I understand why we don't have a federal endowment, because they can actually print money. And from the economics perspective, and the little background that I have with economics, there's different levers that they have that we don't have on the local level. But here on the local level, why do we not have that? Why are we not running off of the interest earned from previous investments? We have these rainy day funds. We have these emergency funds. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go and throw them all into cryptocurrency.
No, of course, of course.
But we can use the same tools that the hedge funds have. These pots are plenty big enough that we can be using these same tools.
So it's interesting because you talk about like the perpetual development fund. You could actually take an endowment, invest it, and then use that as collateral against loans to do things like this. And if you have a decent sized endowment, you're looking at like near zero interest rates on borrowing like that. But I mean, that gets into like the business world, because then you start looking at ROI, and politicians hate return on investment. They want more votes.
Well, and that's another way that I'm helpful, is because I am retired, and I retired young. I've just barely turned 40, right? And I've been able to be a stay-at-home dad for the last 6 years.
Awesome.
Because of two things. One, I'm good at investing. And two, I'm trying to support my wife. And so we're willing to live more frugally than we need to.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you actually want to follow up with you on that question too, because I read some of your stuff, and being a firefighter has informed a lot of what you're thinking about. You want to expand on that a little bit?
So I've got roughly 17 years in the fire service now, and different organizations throughout that time. I've gone from combination departments to municipal department, county department, and back to a combination department that's actually run by a county, being Wake County. So it's given me a lot of insight. I've worked hand in hand with emergency management officials on some larger events, the COVID vaccination clinics, some of the hurricanes. Actually, tornado in Greensboro, we were the initial on scene, initial touchdown area for that. And seeing some of the dysfunction that goes along with the governments, especially when it comes to contracting, say, fire trucks, for example. They've learned how to bid to get what they want, instead of going with a cheaper alternative that is just as good. But we find ways to do the contract bidding process. Like, for example, a fire truck will have a specific type of axle that only one manufacturer makes, because that's their design. So nobody else can beat it out. And so that's the bid. And there's a lot of wasteful spending that way. I'm sure there's probably handouts with that, they well hidden within the contract. But I know, for example, whenever you go up to tour the apparatus, tour the plant and do the final inspection on the apparatus, they're getting a nice big steak dinner.
Oh yeah.
That's all paid for. So it's bad service to the citizens, because we're wasting their funds. We could do a lot better job with the funding, and then the quality of service that a lot of the fire departments provide is inadequate as well, due to current policies within the state that one day I hope to address. Then I do have larger ambitions than just town council. If the mayor's seat was available, I'd actually be going for that this go around to try and gain the experience. But my educational background, I continue to pursue a higher education. I'm currently pursuing my master's at American University in public administration and policy.
Okay.
Plan to do a little bit more with that. And that's provided me a lot of insight as to how the process works, policy analysis and everything else to go about trying to create that change and actually having an impact.
You know, you make a good point about if the mayor's office is there, and on this point, thank you both for running. Sincerely, it's very, very difficult to win your first time, and it's I mean, there's the power of the incumbency, there's forces working against you, but it's also because like you don't know how to run. So then you run and you sort of figure out how to run and you get better at it. I'm running for mayor of Charlotte, and I think I mentioned that earlier, so apologies if I'm being redundant, but I had my first event like, I don't know, a week or two after I had officially declared and campaign kicks in. And I showed up for the event and it was just mayor candidates invited, but the other two couldn't make it. So all of a sudden I was just there and I'm in a debate with the mayor of Charlotte. And it went pretty well, but it was like, that's experience that you cannot manufacture. You know, just being there, taking questions from the audience, responding immediately, being ready to go. And you also get some insight into what the citizens want. I filed based on how bad our education was. And Charlotte's interesting because the mayor and the city council have almost no oversight over education whatsoever. But I was thinking the same as you, JJ. I was like, bully pulpit. Like, I'm just going to call out how terrible our education system is here. And the people did not want to hear it. They were like, if you want to do education, go run for Board of Education. Mayor does other things. All right. Message received. Yeah, you learn, you live, you learn, as they say.
It's been interesting because I'm like a bull in a china shop. I'm not afraid to spit my ideologies and how I feel about the town. And some of the current council members have called me out on it. Some of the managers are a little bit fearful of their jobs. I've said I'm not going to go after their jobs unless they're doing that bad. But it's sort of stirred the citizens within the community. There's a bunch that have started to show an outpouring of support towards me, and it's starting to gain traction. I feel like there's been a silent majority within the community. There's been a few that have spoken up, but the anger has definitely been felt.
Absolutely.
And it's surprising that the four other candidates within the forum, actually one was absent, so the three other candidates within that forum were all very like-minded and basically status quo, that nothing's wrong, we're doing a great job in this town. And yet here's the EPA questioning why we don't have a water quality report. And it's like, if we're doing that great, what's going on? NCDEQ is actually coming out to figure out why we don't have a stormwater plan in place. It's outdated. And we've sort of pushed it off once already, and it looks like they'll probably push it off again. But if the state denies it, the town's facing a $25,000 fine per day.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Yep.
You both have sort of made this point too about what you want to do, but like, and I'm not big on moral victories, but again, sometimes it takes more than one time. But if we are even able to shift the conversation so people start taking us seriously, and it's like, I'm not offering my top-down solution, I'm saying get the people involved, like let the market sort of drive the best solutions, and we do that, that's a really good thing. Well, so along those lines, because you're both running to win, I know. So JJ, I'll start with you on this one. What, you got people listening, how can they help your campaign?
Best thing would be if you're willing to talk to anybody that you know in Durham. This is an off election year, and so the whole thing's going to be decided with like 1,000 votes, right? Yeah. And there are 3 seats open. There are 12 of us running. The primaries are October 10th, and so get out and vote. Call your friends, put it on Facebook, whatever you can. And just spread the word. I mean, if you really want to do more, you can, if you have any skills on graphic design, make me some yard signs, and you can do in-kind donations. Just let me know what they are. But I'm not even trying to raise money. I'm just trying to get the word out there to see if we can, as he said, shift the needle a little bit, get more people talking about this. Because if we can get ranked choice voting, I think we're going to see a huge turnover in the way politics are run.
Absolutely. And for anyone listening, give JJ money. It takes money to run these campaigns, and give Andrew money too. It's expensive, and we're up. I mean, the last the Bud Beasley showdown, I think it was $580 million spent on that. So like, you can spare $20. And what about you, Andrew? How can people help?
Basically that.
Yeah.
It's been a lot more expensive than I thought it would initially be.
Yeah.
And some of those campaign signs that I've put out quickly disappeared.
Yep.
And the town says they didn't take it. I had one slashed, I've had one stolen, and others disappear, and they're running about $15 a pop. So it adds up very quickly, those expenses. And then trying to campaign and have the palm cards to be able to hand out at events and everything else, talking to the citizens within the community, that helps. Basically, those that are within my district, research. The information's out there as to what the candidates' beliefs are. I'm on vote411.org. I provided my answers to that. I've been endorsed by Sustainability and Accountability, or Sustainability and Environmental Coalition of the Triad. I've also been endorsed by Replacements Limited PAC. And to my knowledge, and from what they said, I am actually the first libertarian to be endorsed by them.
That's probably true, to be fair.
Which, it's kind of funny. They're both liberal leaning ideologies. And honestly, I sort of saw myself more of that right wing side of things before going into this a little bit. But learning a little bit more about my ideologies and my beliefs, because I am I'm big into the sustainability, especially when looking at new developments and everything else, and stormwater runoff. I feel like our town could do a lot better job. Having bioswales downtown through Main Street would be a step to try and get that water runoff. And it helps. There's ways to do that help to beautify the downtown area too, and bring a more attractive aesthetic to help draw in, increase the tourism. So
or repeat tourism, especially.
Yeah. So
what is a bioswell?
What was that?
What is a bioswell?
Basically,
am I even saying that right?
Bioswell, it's basically like a stormwater runoff sort of garden area right on the
okay.
It's like a collection point on the road to help filter that the road contaminants before it goes into the sewer system.
And it's usually got like a bunch of wildflowers, or
it varies dependent. Yeah, it varies depending on I want to say it's FEMA or Department of Transportation. They actually have a complete article on sustainable construction for highways and roadways, including in smaller towns as well. And not many listen to it, but Portland's one, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, and then Atlanta with one of their new parks actually did a lot where it's LEED certified. It's their parking garage is parking. It has a parking certification for greenery. I can't remember what the actual certification is there, but they actually have a green roof that helps collect the water runoff and help.
Nice.
Yep.
Then you don't get that problem with the impermeable surfaces. Right. And we're at a good point. Like, you're in a small town, and I'm in a relatively small city. Like, I came from Houston, but because they're still small, we can get these things right now while we're building them. One of the cool things about Africa when I was living there is, instead of running power lines and electrical lines everywhere, they just went straight to cell phones. So people don't have a landline. They never built the landline infrastructure. They just went straight to cell phones. And some of these decentralized electrical systems, because they didn't have to go through all the same steps that we did. We've got the technology in place, like you're talking about, these, roof collecting on the parking garage. That's an incredible little bit that doesn't take much extra to put in.
Yeah. And you get a return on investment. It pays for itself. That's big.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been really big on. So I think that solar farms, I also think wind farms and solar farms are a terrible idea. I think that the
Yep.
environmental impact of those is far greater than any positive. But on the flip side, if we could put solar panels on every sun-facing house in the United States, I think in 1 week we could generate like 5 times the electricity that we use in a year. So you're cutting electric bills by 90%. You're reducing the grid, but you can still use, and I like nuclear, but you can even still have fossil fuels to maintain baseload. But you're cutting emissions significantly. You're reducing cost. It's this all around good idea, but it's a one-time thing, and then maintenance fees. So there's no big money on it. There's no building new solar farms and these giant industries and utilities that are behind it, and so they don't like it. They would rather build, I think 700-foot wind towers off the coast that are killing dolphins and whales, messing with their sonar, and have to be not recycled, but torn down every 8 years, and then the propellers can't be recycled. And then the oil expenditure in building those is something outrageous, but like they're green. It's stuff drives me crazy.
I'm one that, I got the Sustainability and Environmental Coalition, but I'm very against electric vehicles. I feel like they're actually more hazardous and more deadly to the environment than anything else. For one, the mining that goes into getting the minerals and the resources, and then two, the recycling. The batteries are not recyclable in a lot of it, and a lot of the parts aren't recyclable. So what happens when those cars do reach the end of their life? Because it is a battery, it does degrade over time to where it won't be usable in 10, 15 years. And you're adding a lot there. Three, the electrical grid can't maintain our current peak loads. They were actually having to gate electricity back during the summer months, and they were asking people that have the smart thermostats to allow Duke Energy the access to be able to crank their temperature up during the daytime, just so it was not using as much electricity. There's other green avenues out there. One of the biggest that the government doesn't have their hands in the pockets of those corporations would be hydrogen power. It's
still being developed.
Yep, you can create green hydrogen using solar and water turbine technology to help create the energy to where you're not actually having to expend biofuels to produce it, and then it off gases water. So it's probably the most clean type fuel out there for the environment currently, and the government can't really the infrastructure is not there for one, but the government can't profit on it as much as say electricity, or govern it as much as say electricity.
And so they'll never let it happen.
Well, it's starting to happen in Europe. England is starting to go heavily into it, and then the rest of the European Union is starting to invest more into it. Almost every European vehicle manufacturer has come out or shown releases for hydrogen powered vehicles.
Interesting.
Yep. And almost
into that.
Yeah, almost every single manufacturer last year at the European Auto Show was hydrogen powered.
Okay.
Or having hydrogen powered alternatives. So they're starting to come to the realization that electric vehicles aren't the way of the future. Yeah, they'll have their spot, but there needs to be another alternative to help bridge that gap.
You know if they're doing hydrogen fuel cells, or are they just doing like hydrogen? Because
honestly,
one of the big issues is the explosiveness.
Yeah, I mean, Toyota's had one for years, the Toyota Mira in California, and it's been fairly sustainable. I don't know of any large or any fire events with it or anything like that. Definitely not compared to Tesla, unfortunately. And Tesla, I know they just had actually a fire at Raleigh-Durham Airport last week that the car was disintegrated by the time they got it under control. Because
really, wow,
yeah, there's not much you can do about a lithium-ion fire. It takes so copious amounts of water to cool it, and if you're not applying enough water, it uses it and turns it into a fuel.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
I know I have a hybrid, and I am probably more environmental than a lot of people listening, but I didn't get the hybrid for that reason. I just hate the gas station. Like I hate the gas station. It's I'll pay my like I asked my wife. I've never paid her to do it. She'd probably get more mad at that. I'm like, hey, you want to go get gas for me?
Oh, I'd go
Weird
for a
thing.
hybrid all day long.
I get 42 miles to the gallon. I'm pretty happy with it. Um,
I've been praying that hydrogen takes off and I can switch to it. I would jump on that train in a heartbeat.
I want a nuclear powered car. I'd be pretty happy for
Mars rover.
Well, look, we're coming up on an hour. I really appreciate both your time. I will continue to make sure you are in the newsletters and all the stuff going out, promoting you in every way I can. What's your message you want to leave the audience with?
Vote for politicians who are willing to promote political reform, true
So
political reform.
non-politicians.
Yes, you know, and that's the biggest problem is that the major political parties know that this is going to damage their base. And so, for instance, here in North Carolina, if you want to work on the gerrymandering, if you want to break the supermajority, ranked choice voting is going to be the easiest and fastest way that we can get there.
Yeah, basically the same. I'm very for the ranked choice voting. It will help break that two-party system that is currently out there. Because let's face it, unfortunately, once you get outside of town, city, and county politics, the Libertarian Party doesn't have a really good shot at winning a lot of these larger positions in these states. Mainly because they don't get the super PAC backing to provide all that funds to run the ads that you see constantly on the radio or on TV and on the radio. And it makes it difficult. Whereas a ranked system actually provides the choice to where people don't feel like they're going to be throwing away their vote. They actually have the option to vote for that other that they truly agree with their views. And now they actually have a shot because they feel like others will vote that way too, knowing that.
No more lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Which that's always seemed ridiculous to me. I've been libertarian like from the beginning, which is a whole other thing. I just, as my wife says, I don't like being told what to do. I was born an asshole, and it just no, as my wife says,
the hedgehog from the beginning.
I actually, it was in high school for me, and the two issues were actually marijuana legalization and gay marriage. So I went to a Catholic high school, and I was like people get high and they play video games and laugh. People get drunk, they get in accidents, they die, they get violent. Like, this is insane that you can go to jail for this one. And then with the gay marriage thing, it was like, all right, let's take the furthest religious possibility. Let's say like God really does hate all the homosexuals and they're all going to burn in hell. It's none of my business. Like why are we trying to enforce our morality on someone else? And that's the worst case scenario. I was like, I remember when Britney Spears married a guy named Jason Alexander, not Seinfeld Jason Alexander, but for 24 hours. And I was like, so this is supposed to be totally fine, but like two people that are really in love are just like not allowed to be together because someone's decided their morality should be spread over the country. And so then I heard Ron Paul speak at the 98 debates, and I was like, whoa, I'm in. This is awesome.
I mean, my place of work, we actually have a volunteer with us that's in the process of transitioning. And just to see the change from other people's beliefs and how they treat him. Well, she now, but they don't treat her as they should. She's not a different person. It's the same person, same beliefs, and same nice person she was before. And it's like, why are you treating her any different? You might not agree with it, but they're no different than how they were before. It's the same person inside. And
to that point, I agree with you completely. I do think there's some complexities to that issue because the bathroom and the sports thing, no matter what you think about them, are legitimate concerns for both sides.
Yeah.
And particularly bathrooms, when you talk about someone transitioning, so if you have male to female, and there are women that's like, that's a guy, and I don't feel safe with a guy in my bathroom, it's like, okay, I respect that. And then you talk to someone who transitioned male to female, and they're like, I present as a woman now, I don't feel safe in a male bathroom. And it's like, okay, I also hear and respect that. Like, this is a really complicated issue, and it's one that a one size fits all government mandate from the top down is the only thing that is certainly going to do is ruin everything.
Yeah. And that was one of the questions Replacements Limited asked before they actually endorsed me, was my beliefs on those issues. And that is a difficult one, because you do have women's sports that there are certain sports that a male that has transitioned will dominate in those sports. It's just the biological features are a little bit more superior in that regard. Like the swimming last year, where multiple records were broken. So it's difficult, but then again, you can't really discriminate and eliminate them from those sports. So that was the question mark. How do you solve that issue? And it's more like, do you offer two different awards, or do you do a open division? And
you mentioned fairness, and certainly the whole, like the Leah Thomas, the swimming thing, but there was that male to female transitioner in the UFC who just destroyed that woman, and I was like, this just became a safety issue. And it was I think she'd only transitioned for a year, like hormone levels were far from what they might have been, but it's like you said, the lung capacity, the skeletal structure, the muscle structure. But again, this just highlights how nuanced and like complicated some of these issues are, and all the good ones, things like abortion. Like, there are really strong competing interests between, like, at what point is it a life, and does it have a right to life, and does that right to life supersede the mother's right to bodily autonomy? And I'm certainly not inviting an abortion discussion here. I'm just pointing out people, this is really deeply held. And the only thing I am sure of is that the government is the worst possible entity to try to solve them.
Yep. Yeah.
On that note,
politicians are not experts in these fields. This is why we need more scientists.
Politicians are experts in getting elected.
Yes.
And that is not a good reason to elect someone. Gents, I appreciate your time immensely. We will be posting all of your social and website and any other collateral you have. Please feel free to reach out if you need anything else. And everyone listening, you'll give these guys some money, volunteer, phone bank, do something. Let's get some libertarians elected. We got, I think, 16 running, 15. I should know that number exactly, but it's right in there. Let's get them all elected. Andrew, JJ, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're anything like me, you may find yourself constantly overwhelmed by everything that's wrong with politics. And when I say politics, I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about the flaws that exist in our political system, regardless of which party is in power. And I know it's hard to talk about politics these days, but look, the government is ours. We pay for it, so it needs to work for us. And right now it doesn't, and I mean it really doesn't. So what's going on here? Is it Russian meddling in social media? Is it him? Is it her? No. Those two were the least popular presidential candidates since they began keeping track of such things. Only 4% of Americans have a great deal of confidence in Congress now. Just 4%. America is no longer even considered a full democracy. We are witnessing a total political system failure in America, which is the complete opposite of what our nation's founders had in mind. So I'm going to show you 3 lines that show what's causing this failure, how we can fix it, and what you can do about it. So here's your first line. What I want you to do is take any issue you really care about and picture it on this line. This line comes from a Princeton University study that shows how public opinion influences the laws that Congress does or doesn't pass. They looked at 1,800 public opinion polls over a 20-year period, and we took their data and plotted it in this chart. See this horizontal line? That shows public support for a law amongst average Americans. This vertical line, that shows the likelihood of the public support leading to the passage of a law. When you plot it for the average American, you get a line that looks like this. There's your issue sitting on that line. If there is zero support for a law, there's about a 30% chance that Congress is going to pass it. And if there is 100% support for something, the most popular thing ever, there's still a 30% chance that Congress is going to pass it. So the line is horizontal because no matter how much support there is among average Americans, there's still a 30% chance that Congress is going to pass that law. Princeton determined that the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact on public policy. How in the hell does that happen? Consider this. Politicians are spending up to 70% of their time raising funds for re-election after they get into office. Why? Because in order to win a seat in the Senate in some races, you would have to raise $45,000 every single day, 365 days a year for 6 years to raise enough money to win. Now consider that only 0.05% of Americans give more than $10,000 to politics. And then you see why politicians have become completely dependent on the 0.05% of Americans, billionaires and special interest groups, who fund their campaigns. Meanwhile, you've got lobbyists writing our laws and donating to the politicians who pass them. We have a two-party duopoly of Democrats and Republicans that makes it so that independents can't win, while the American people are leaving the major parties in droves. As you can see here, nearly half of American voters are now registered independent. And then there's gerrymandering, with politicians drawing the boundaries of their own voting districts into crazy shapes designed to prevent competition. Today, only 14% of House campaigns are actually competitive. 86% of them are not. And we wonder why young people feel that their vote doesn't matter. I've covered a lot here, but it all adds up to this vast ring of influence over our elected leaders. It's a corrupt system in which we, the people, have near zero influence over our own government. And that is sad. That is not the country I feel like I grew up in. But what's worse is that by allowing this to happen, we are causing the failure of the most important issues facing our nation. We're wasting trillions of dollars a year on fraud and abuse in our own government. 1 in 5 American children live in poverty. Our health care is the most expensive in the world. We have more people in prison per capita than Russia and China. We're losing jobs to the rest of the world, and we're not even doing enough to keep our air and our water clean for our children. America was founded on the promise of self-governance, but instead we have statistically non-significant impact on public policy. So the question is, how do we unrig this system? I'm obsessed with this idea, not just of unrigging it, but actually fixing it. That's when I met Josh.
This is it. This is the issue behind the issues. If we fix the system, we'll have so much more power to fix everything else. So I spoke to some of the most brilliant people in the country. Constitutional scholar Lawrence Lessig, Zephyr Teachout, and dozens of other constitutional scholars and experts and strategists. They all said the same thing. You could pass a law that would stop political bribery and fix our broken elections. And if you could do that, you could wrest power away from the corrupt establishment and put it back in the hands of the people. Here's how you fix our broken elections. End gerrymandering with independent redistricting commissions.
Create ranked choice voting so third parties and independents can run and win.
Implement automatic voter registration and vote from home.
And here's how we can crack down on political bribery. Overhaul lobbying and ethics laws and close the revolving door so politicians can't be bribed with high-paying job offers.
Mandate full transparency of political spending so we know who's trying to buy influence.
Give every voter a $50 or $100 tax voucher so politicians spend time fundraising from their constituents, not just that 0.05% that I talked about earlier.
If you could pass even just some of these reforms, you would undo that ring of influence and begin to reinstate we the people as the most important influence over our elected leaders. So we took all of these reforms and put them in a model law and named it the Anti-Corruption Act. And get this, 87% of Americans support making the Anti-Corruption Act the law of the land. Look at the breakdown. 91% of Democrats and 83% of Republicans. It's incredible. Now, you might be thinking 9 out of 10 Americans. Surely Congress will pass it. But on this issue, more than any other issue, it's like asking the fox to put a lock on the henhouse. Politicians won in the current system, and they have an incentive not to fix it. So we need to go around Congress, in this case, by passing anti-corruption acts in cities and states all across America. Now, every time I say this, people look at me and say, how does passing city and state laws lead to fixing all of these problems with the federal government?
Can I do this part?
Go for it.
So, first of all, the US Constitution gives states sole control over how elections are run, even federal elections. So when we fix gerrymandering or election laws, that fixes a federal election in each state. That means that by going state by state, we have an immediate impact on how we elect Congress and how we hold them accountable. But there's more, and that brings us to our second line. This line is from a Bloomberg News study. It finds that throughout American history, passing state laws leads to federal victory. Let me show you what I mean. This chart shows the number of states over time that pass laws giving women the right to vote. When it hits the right side of the chart, that's the federal victory. Okay, now I want you to watch the blue line. We're gonna do this again with interracial marriage. There were a few states in the Northeast that made it legal decades ago, and centuries go by, and we hit this blue line where all of a sudden there's a rush of activity, which leads pretty quickly to federal passage. So here we are again with same-sex marriage. One state, Massachusetts, for many years. A couple decades later, we hit that blue line, a jump in state activity and federal passage. This isn't about these issues. This is about a winning political strategy. The crucial finding in the Bloomberg study is that a key event, often a court decision or a grassroots campaign reaching maturity, triggers a rush of state activity that ultimately leads to a change in federal law. So fixing this problem is possible, but how do we create our trigger moment for this issue? Well, the grassroots campaign from the study, that's Represent Us. We're bringing conservatives and progressives together to pass anti-corruption laws all across America, using 3 strategic innovations: right-left coalitions, calling out corruption, and building a movement, a big movement. And I'm gonna break them down for you.
Can I do this part?
No. First, right-left. This is how people self-identify in America. This isn't party identification. This is how you feel politically. And as you can see, it's 25% liberal, 36% conservative, and 34% moderate. But for the past 40 years on the reforms I've outlined, it's liberals speaking to liberals using liberal language with liberal messengers, liberal. I just had to say that one more time. And you're just not gonna change the political power structure of America with 25% of the people. Fixing corruption requires that we enlist all Americans, liberal, conservatives, and moderates who, as we've shown, overwhelmingly support reform. Number 2, corruption. When we talk about money in politics, gerrymandering, democracy, campaign finance reform, most people just tune out, but people are fired up about corruption. And number 3, we must build a movement, a big movement comprised of all kinds of people from all across America fighting to pass anti-corruption laws, and then make sure they are implemented and protected. So again, liberals and conservatives working together, corruption, and build a movement. This is the foundation of Represent Us. We believe the government should work for every American, not just a handful of billionaires and special interests. But it's not just an idea. In a few years, we've already racked up 85 wins all across the country. And if we can get those 85 wins to 850 wins, we can fix our corrupt political system, save America, and get to work on fixing everything else that's broken in our country. This is how we build this movement big enough to trigger that rush of state activity that leads to a change in federal law. And that brings us to our last line. Right now, this is you. And right now, these are all of the ways that you can help us go state by state, city by city, to fix the corruption in American politics. Volunteer and join a Represent Us chapter. Or, if that's not your thing, join the Commonwealth to make a monthly donation in support of someone who does volunteer. 100% of your money goes straight to passing these laws, not to overhead or our expenses. Every voice matters. Your voice matters. If you do nothing, nothing changes. But if we all do a little, we can win together. So the only question left is this: will you cross that line? Join us at represent.us.
Hey there again, y'all. It is time for another Dub and Groo, but again, unfortunately, Groo can't be with us again this time. It is another DDNC with the illustrious chair of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina, Mr. Ryan Brown. Ryan, how are you doing this good day?
I'm doing well. I was doing better before you called me illustrious, but I appreciate you hyping up your guests. So.
Yay, you're a sport for doing this again with me. And again, we send our best to Groo. And he let us know tonight he wasn't still at 100%. We understand that. And, we send him our best. But let's get to the meat and potatoes of why we're here. We're here to talk about the happenings here in North Carolina and maybe a little bit of outside realms. We got to start with the elephant in the room, or should I say the panther in the room. This team is now 0-5, and it does not seem to be getting any better. They laid a big fat egg up in Detroit. I wasn't able to watch the game because I was at work. I was able to catch the highlights though eventually, and it looked like the first quarter was filled with momentum, but momentum was stalled once Miles Sanders fumbled and Bryce Young throwing 2 picks deep in Detroit, or in their own territory, giving Detroit a short field, doomed their day. 3 turnovers to none for a -3, but it was Bryce Young's first 3 touchdown day. Otherwise, he is showing improvement, but the team does not seem to have a pulse. And I want to wish the best to Chandler Zavala. He suffered a very bad neck stinger where he got boarded off the field, but he gave a thumbs up as he was going off the field, which was a positive sign. And from all indications, he flew back with the team to Charlotte, and he seems to have just had a really bad stinger, but he will probably be held out of practice as a precaution for the first few days while team doctors assess. So,
Yeah, that is,
yeah,
he gave the thumbs up.
Yeah, it is, but this week the Panthers will face the Miami Dolphins, who currently have the best yardage in all of the NFL total yards. And as we know, they were known for putting up a 70-burger on a very bad Broncos team. I cannot imagine if they, go guns to the floorboard and everything else, what they will put up against the Panthers if the Panthers, still try to trot out this pedestrian and vanilla offense.
Yeah, the Dolphins, they're 4-1, and they beat the Giants, who are, the Giants this year, 31-16. That's including throwing a 102-yard pick six and having a fumble in the first half, and then apparently another fumble, I think. So 3 total turnovers. Or no, 2 interceptions. So 3 total turnovers, and they still won.
Yeah, and that's how good of a team Miami is. They got humbled a little bit by Buffalo, which Buffalo got re-humbled back when they went over to London and lost to Jacksonville. So as you know, it's any given Sunday in the NFL. So I guess anything can happen, but there's not a lot of joy in Charlotte for what the Panthers are doing, and all eyes are looking to the bye week with relief and anticipation on what will happen. So that's it for that. And as we stay in the football realm, North Carolina improved to 5-0 with a resounding 40-7 win over Syracuse, which puts them at 5-0 for the first time since Mac Brown last coached them in the 90s. And any update on your app, boys?
Well, I should be paying attention more, but I haven't actually paid attention to them this past weekend. But it did look like, let's see, they did not have a game.
So they were on bye this week.
There you go. That makes sense. That's why I didn't watch them. I'm a great
That's
fan.
probably a good reason.
I knew
why
that
you
ahead
were-
of time.
Yeah.
I just had a sense that they weren't playing. Yeah.
And also, all the other schools and people are, wondering whether State was overhyped before the season, because they have not really shown themselves to be a formidable team, unfortunately. And they've sort of had a very slow start out of the gate. And, it's a lot to be desired over there in Raleigh with their football team, because I know they had much higher expectations. And of course, this is certainly setting up for a trap game at the end of the season when Carolina has to play State. And if State is, fighting for a bowl game, saying they're at 5-6 and Carolina's trying to fight to play in the ACC championship, that's going to be one heck of a rivalry game. Going on.
The rivalry games always have a way of working themselves into something that they're more than anyway. So
yeah,
even if NC State has a bummer of a season, they're still going to play UNC hard that day, I bet.
Oh yeah, and it's no different with the Victory Bell with Carolina and Duke. But I can remember the days when Carolina and Duke was the last game of the season, and a few years ago they just swapped it. They swapped State to become the last game of the season and Duke to be in the middle of the season, because that one involves an actual trophy, the Victory Bell. And I like that tradition, because whoever wins, they either keep it the color, or if they steal it away, they have spray cans of Krylon ready to go to paint it the other color blue. And it's just a fun tradition. And I remember the year Carolina won it at Wally World, and they went to grab the bell off the other side, and they were already spraying it. And, Duke got upset because they got Carolina blue paint on when it was still a track circling the field. So, it was a funny thing. But as we're talking a little bit about history, one of my favorite things that ever happened in college football was back when Hurricane Floyd hit North Carolina. ECU got displaced because Dowdy Ficklen Stadium got flooded. So they had to play their out-of-conference game against Miami at Carter Finley in Raleigh. And they came from 20-0 down to beat the Miami Hurricanes. And the greatest thing I've ever seen is ECU students rushing the field to tear down NC State's goalposts. That is probably the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, because it was a displaced community, a displaced football team, and they came together to pull off a great upset, beating a good Miami team at the time.
And they were never invited back because they knocked down the goalpost.
Right. Yeah. I don't think ECU and State have even played since. Not even at Dowdy Ficklen, or even in a neutral venue like Charlotte or something.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's State's problem for letting them use the stadium. But, if State didn't provide any security or anything, that's a liability. If they didn't put in the contract, hey, you got to make sure your fans don't come on our field and mess up our field or mess up our goalposts. I think a lot of oversight was made, and I'm sorry to say, that's State's fault. So no.
Well, State fans are perfect in every other. Well,
yeah,
State fans
apparently,
well. And it's all the other team's fault. So
yeah, it always is, and everything harkens back to 1983. We all know that. So anyway, as we go to the other football, Charlotte FC won again, a 2-0 win. And so now they've made 2 wins in 2 games. But unfortunately, the cards are still stacked against them. They still have to win their last 2 matches. And it'll be interesting because the finale of those 2 matches will be Inter Miami in Charlotte later on this month for the last game of the season. And it could be for the last playoff spot, but I just have this sneaky suspicion it won't be. I have a feeling, I don't know why I have such pessimism with this team. They have proven me, when I think they're doing good, they've just proven me wrong every single time, or they just throw up a big old goose egg. And it's just, I don't know, the way this team has performed overall through the seasonal arc, they don't deserve to make the playoffs, in my opinion. And it would be a disgrace if they did, because I just think they would just fall out in the first round or the play-in game, which it would be. And it's like, no, we just need a hard reset, at least coaching and tactic-wise, and we might not have all our players that we have this year next year. So it's just where we got to go back to the drawing board.
So what's the rundown there? I guess there's 34 games in a season.
36.
So 36, okay.
36. And then 9 teams make the playoffs. The 8-9 game is the play-in game. The top 7 teams automatically get to the quarterfinals of the conference. And then it's one-off playoffs all the way to the conference final. And then whoever wins the Eastern plays whoever wins the Western for the MLS Cup. And it used to be back in the before, I guess 3 years ago, when it got to the conference semifinals, they would be 2-leg affairs for the conference semifinals and the conference finals, and then the MLS Cup would be a one-off game. But when they decided to expand the playoffs, they said we can't do 2-leg affairs anymore, and so it just became single elimination.
Fair enough.
So,
yeah, I love how they're trying to merge sort of the like Champions League double elimination kind of game, or not double elimination, but 2 games total into the regular season, where like in any other league, the regular season as well, who has the most points at the end of the day. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, it would be interesting, but I for one, have watched the MLS. I mean, I'm talking back in the beginning days when they used to have, when they had penalty shootouts, they would actually be shootouts. Like the player starts at midfield and runs the ball in towards the goal, and it's 1-on-1 versus the goalie. And I think that was much more exciting than a penalty kick, personally.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's still an element of soccer.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
They should put it in a 3-game series like they do for the MLB, or best of 7 in hockey. Just give the American sport, or give it a little American twist.
Well, they had an American twist to it because also with those shootout rules, they were using the NCAA version of the clock. They were counting down from 45 and actually stopping the clock during major stoppages. So there was no stoppage time.
Interesting.
So, but it turned off, like died in the wool, soccer fans who are used to seeing a count up clock, and when you didn't know when the referee was going to blow time, and but
that is pretty good. I didn't, I'll be honest with you, I never even knew that they used to do the whole shootout thing.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
pretty
If you
good.
go on YouTube, you can certainly find it. It is a hoot, but it was exciting at the same time.
Yeah, why not?
So why not
start 35 yards out and go 1-on-1?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like a good idea. But as we pivot from that, all the basketballs are beginning to bounce, both in the NBA and in college. I know coming up here, there will be a lot of Midnight Madness games going on. And, there's high expectations in Durham. There's high expectations in Chapel Hill. There's high expectations in Raleigh. But I miss the days when even some of the mid-major North Carolina schools had a say. I'm talking during the Bobby Lutz days down in Charlotte. I am talking the Davidson days. Bob McKillop, even when he didn't have Steph Curry, could win, the CAA once again, because he's always got a strong Davidson team. There was the year Western was a 3-pointer away from beating Purdue in the first round, and they would have been the first 16 to beat a 1.
And that was how long ago? Probably 30 years.
That was in the late 90s, I think 98 or 99. But somebody brought this point up. Purdue just does not do good when they're a top 4 seed in a region. And it's like they're either out in the first or second round. And then last year they got beat as a 1 to become the second one to get beat by a 16. It was crazy.
Well, thankfully, I think the only I didn't remember that one, but I did remember Virginia losing, right? That's the first time.
Oh, yeah, they lost, but that one was much worse. But the turnaround was much better because the next year Virginia won the title. But to lose by 20?
Yeah, well, the thing is, no one remembers the second one to do it. So maybe you do, but maybe not everyone else.
Yeah. Good old Fairleigh Dickinson University, FDU. So I could not believe that it had happened twice now in 5 years. But it goes to show you with NIL, I think a lot of parity is starting to be created in both college basketball and college football. Because we see a lot more upsets now than we ever did. I think probably I can remember 2007, there was just nobody could stay in second place. If you were ranked second in 2007, it was a curse because you would lose the next week or week after. You just nobody could do it. And I've never seen anything like that, but it'll be interesting because this is the last year of what I like to call Triple F, the football Final Four, aka the college football playoff. So, from then on, it'll be a 12-team playoff with 6 conference champions, or either 5 conference champions now with the demise of the Pac-12. And
we'll just get a second one. That'll be fine. No worries.
And then 7 at-large berths. It'll be the grand committee selecting that again. And the thing is, the one thing I've liked about the college football playoff is I think they've done the polls right, because they don't put their first poll out until the 8th week of play. When you know who's good, you know who's bad, you know who's in the middle, and you get a more fair representation of who really is the cream rising to the top.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to have that guy who, or the team that's won 2 games, blowed out some, nobody teams in the first couple of weeks, and they're number 1 seed, and then they, or not. I mean, they wouldn't quite do that bad, but you say they're top 10 or top 20 or something, and they get blowed up by a team who's probably top 50.
Yeah, and that to me, it puts out a much better product, if you ask me. But unless UNC, like I said, runs the table, and that includes winning the ACC, do I think they even have a shot at making the playoff? Because they might look at their schedule and go, yeah, you didn't play Florida State. You only played Clemson because they were your opponent in the conference, or you only played Florida State because they were your opponent in the conference championship. And, what can you say about that? But you can only deal the cards the schedule makers gave you.
Yep. So
That
what are
is
we looking at again?
conference-wide.
What are we looking at again this year? Alabama, Auburn, the Ohio State, and then what, a fourth person in there?
Yeah. But I think maybe the Pac-12 might beat itself up again, but that's about it. So, but like I said, basketball's starting up. The Hornets are getting ready to play. They're starting to play preseason games, but of course they don't count. They don't matter. They've got to make their roster cuts and assignments to the Swarm in Greensboro. So we won't say much about that tonight. And of course, with that, there's not much more to say about the sports going on in North Carolina. The baseball playoffs are still going.
Do we know when? I'm sure we do. When do they kick off basketball? They're for real?
The opening night of the NBA it's not for all teams, but it's for the defending champions, of course. That'll be on October 24th.
Okay.
And most everybody will either start on the 25th or the 26th.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
About 2.5 weeks out then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, just like in baseball or football, we have to play these meaningless preseason games to no end. And, NHL goes, you play 6, you're done. Start the season. So, but anyway, that about wraps it up from here. Is there anything you would like to add, Sir Ryan?
Not a whole lot, but please stop calling me sir, man. You're treating me too nice here.
But anyway, again, to our good buddy Travis Groo, we hope you're feeling better enough to join us next week. And from all of us here at Liberty Inc., we want to wish y'all a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are.
Thank you, Will.